troublesome snippets were bugging us when we left the class last time, and I think we need to solve that part. And we have learned so far that IO devices exist. They have data, status, and control registers, and they look very much like memory devices. And right, um, I think we don't have to look at this part. I think this is what we did. And then we went to interrupts, and we said that interrupts are snippets of code in which I use the phrase, when a IO device is ready, it can tap the CPU on its shoulder and say, CPU, I'm ready, please do something for me. And that please do something for me is called a interrupt service subroutine, ISR, or interrupt service routine, sometimes called an interrupt handler because it handles an interrupt. And then, hello, is somebody asking something?
Oh, no. My daughter was asking me something about my.
Oh, how sweet. You tell her to wait for 20 years. Then she can ask me in my class.
Yes.
I think she must be below 3.
She's 8 years old. She's asking about.
She only has to wait for 10 more years.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the CPU therefore saves what it is doing, right? And that is called a context. And we also mentioned in passing I hope all of you remember the Pringles and the way you push and access potato chips from a Pringles pack is very much like a stack. You push things into a stack, you pop things out of a stack. And the CPU saves by pushing several things, all the things it needs to come back, right? Including the program counter and +1 instruction and all the things it needs to save, right? This is very much like, if you are studying on the table and somebody comes and tells you, please chop these 5 tomatoes for me and give it to me, I need it immediately. So what do you do with your study table? You clear away your textbooks, you put a bookmark on the page where you were, you close your pen, you wear an apron, and then you take a knife instead of a pen and you slice. And when the tomatoes are done, you go deliver it in the kitchen, you come back, you wipe your table, take off your apron, open your textbook, uncap your pen, and resume where you were studying. I mean, this is so before you slice the tomatoes for your mother, you clear your table and save a context. The context is the page you were on, the chapter you were reading, the equation you were solving. This is the context. When you resume a context. So you open the textbook again at the bookmark page, you start solving the equation where you stop. So that's what the CPU does. It's a very simple story. So since we have to make a profession out of this, we say it's a context. That's the professional term by which we refer to it. But basically, it's like any other human being doing something which stopping something to do something else. The advantage of this is that this tap on the shoulder means the CPU never calls anything. It's only when the interrupting device is ready that it tells the CPU, I am ready, come service me. So that's the good part. And we also saw this diagram saying this is the main code, and this orange bit, right? This orange bit is the orange bordered instruction is the instruction where the interrupt happened. And then you go service the interrupt. This green piece of code is the interrupt service routine. And then you come back and you resume, which means you start from the next instruction you were supposed to do. Had the interrupt not happened, you would have executed this green instruction, this one. But since the interrupt happened, you do that after this time. Obviously, this going to that instruction and coming back is not exactly without anything else. I mean, this is not all that simple. So maybe I should do a little bit here, like for instance, okay, so maybe I should say that out here there is something which happens in the assembly code which you write. And out here, there is something which happens to return to the place where you write it. But this is how it is handled. But what is done is depicted in this diagram very accurately. One of the ways, I mean, before I leave this diagram, one of the ways in which this sort of transfer of execution happens in a microprocessor, let's say 8085, is to invoke a call, right? A call instruction expects an address to which it will jump. So if you say call, let's say 1605, so it will go to the address 1605 when it executes the call instruction and execute whatever it finds there. So let's assume that this particular address was 1605, just for just for an example. But the problem is that as it executes like this, right, you know, unless you put something special out here, oops, unless you put something special out here, it's not going to come back here. So what is going to happen? It's going to drop off. It's going to execute like this and drop off the edge of the program. And where it will go, you don't know. So you have to stop it at this point and say, hey, now this part is over. Go back and do what you were doing. So you have to do something special in the assembly code you write. And that is in the code written in your textbook. You'll find that piece of code there. Let's return to that part. Of course, you know return. We return all the time in subroutines. For instance, if you write a C subroutine, we return something, return to the point. But you don't know how it returns. So here it's a very close to the machine type of code which you are writing. So there will be an assembly opcode which will return to the place. Now, this aspect, I think I should clear this. I am okay. Pointer options is erase all ink and laser pointer. Fine. So we also discussed this, that, you know, if you are encountering an interrupt on this instruction, you will not stop and branch off to the interrupt service routine here. You will go right up to the end of the instruction, and we talked about these T3 T states and machine cycles in this context. So you will go to the end, it executes on the instruction boundary, and then comes back and executes the instruction I plus 1. Whatever it was executing, the next instruction is executed. So a return from interrupt instruction at the end of the service routine reloads the program counter from that temporary storage location, and therefore the program counter doesn't know whatever you load it with, it will execute from that point. And there are places where you save that return address, either a GPR, general purpose register, or on the stack. So that is the mechanism of handling an interrupt. Now, what happens between the CPU and the peripheral? It's all very nice to say an peripheral taps the CPU on the shoulder. What does tap on the shoulder mean from an electrical point of view, from a timing point of view? Well, when somebody taps me on the shoulder, one is to actually place the hand on my shoulder and say, please do this, right? So you come and place the hand on the shoulder. I look at you, then you say, please do this, and then you take your hand off my shoulder. Now, this is like, you know, asserting a signal from 0 to 1. For instance, your hand was not on my shoulder, corresponds to 0. Your hand was placed on my shoulder, corresponds to 1. Your hand remains on my shoulder, means the signal stays at 1. Then you tell me that, hey, I want service. So what I do is I say, okay, I saw your hand on my shoulder. I now will service you. You can take your hand off my shoulder. So if I say that to you, it means I'm telling you now you can take your hand off my shoulder because I know that you are asking me for service. Now that's one way of interrupting me. The other way of interrupting me is, right, that you just touch me on the shoulder, right? So if you touch me on the shoulder, it's a brief touch. I might notice it, I might not notice it. If I'm actually watchfully, very carefully tuned to notice touch, then I will notice it. But if I'm not geared to noticing touches, right, then I will not notice it. Right? For instance, a brief event which happens, like Professor Dogra's daughter came in, she said that she sees her father in front of a screen at a time at which she is used to having her father do something for her. So she says something like, come play with me, and goes away, right? Or she pokes him in the stomach and goes away. Now the question is Professor Dogra geared or designed to acknowledge a brief small child's poke in the stomach or not? Now, if you're a father, you learn to get interrupts from your children in any form. So he will handle it because he's designed to handle pokes. But suppose his wife wants him to go and fetch a liter of milk. She has to come. She has to put her hand on his shoulder, shake him and say, "Dear Professor Dogra, it is time to get the milk. Are you listening to me? Please say you are listening to me." Then Professor Dogra says, "Yes, yes, I listen to you. I'm in the middle of a class. Now I'm going to service your milk request." Then she will stop putting her hand on his shoulder, poking him, asking him, etc., etc. So the difference between Professor Dogra's daughter's interruption and Professor Dogra's wife's interruption is what we call in the interrupt language as a edge level interrupt and a level triggered interrupt. A edge triggered interrupt is like the daughter spoke in the stomach. It briefly happens. Unless you are geared to receive it, you will miss it, right? A lot of interrupts are like that. But if you want a definitive interrupt, then what happens is that it's a more involved thing. You interrupt, you expect and acknowledge. So Professor Dogra must turn around and said, "Yes, yes, I notice you are asking me for going to get milk. So I will go and get milk." Only then will she stop interrupting him. That's a level interrupt. So what I'm saying is that the mouse is not responding very well, but still, what I'm saying is there could be an interrupt which is like this, and there could be an interrupt which is like this, right? And there could be a variant of this interrupt like this, where only this part is important, the rising part, or of course the falling part. And there's nothing special about this. But you know, here in this interrupt, it is this part which is important, the level part. Here it is this part which is important. This part, the rising and falling edge. So you call it an edge interrupt or a level interrupt, right? So it depends. There are all types of interrupts, right, in the world. And my mouse is misbehaving. Erase all ink and come back to laser pointer. Fine. So either you explicitly say, "I got your interrupt. I acknowledge it, right? And I'm going to do something more." Or you have the transfer of data itself as an acknowledgement. For instance, suppose Professor Dogra's wife comes and says, "Professor Dogra, please go get milk." And Professor Dogra pulls out the packet of milk which he has had the foresight to get and says, "Here is your milk." Don't you think that's just the same as saying, "Okay, I'm going to service your request for milk"? So giving her back the milk packet is the same thing. So you can have the transfer of data between the processor and the IO device accomplish the same purpose. Fine. So you then must know that this particular routine which you just executed, this interrupt handling subroutine or interrupt service routine, is not just a service routine. You know what subroutines are. You know what things which do things are, like function calls in C. But here, an interrupt service routine, though it is very similar to a subroutine, it must preserve the context. It has to come back, so it has to preserve the context. Right? Then any subroutine performs a function required by the program from which it called, right? So the program knows I'm going to call a function called add. I'm going to pass two operands to it, A and B. It is going to add A and B and return C to me. So this is expected. But a service, so there is a expectation that at the point at which you call in a subroutine called add, you are going to add two numbers. You know it. That's why you are calling the subroutine. But when you have an interrupt service routine, it may not have any relation to the program and its context which is being executed. So it may happen at any time. Therefore, it needs to save a lot more things. Right? So it's like suppose you are a tuition master, right? And you are teaching 4 students. You know that you have your study table, they have their tables in front of you. Periodically, you may say, please add these two numbers and tell me the result. So one of the students then will come back and say, sir, the result is 6. That is what you expected, that they will tell you the result. So it's not out of context. But while you're taking your tuition, if somebody tells you to cut tomatoes or fetch milk, that is out of context. Computer architecture has nothing to do with tomato slicing. So interrupt service routines are always unexpected. That is why they are interrupts, right? And they may not be related at all to what is going on at the time in the CPU. Therefore, status information, processor registers, which may be changed, because after all, any subroutine will change any register in the processor. So you must save all registers which you think are vital to your return, right? Registers, even flags, even though we don't do that very often, even flags. Right? So the saved information must be restored so that life goes on as usual after you have sliced the tomatoes or fetched the milk. I think that is a good place to say a story. 3 stories. One is, so this is like a mama bear, papa bear, baby bear type of story. So we have a papa bear, we have a mama bear, and we have a sister bear, right? All telling Sushant, right, to go get the milk. So in the first yellow story, Sushant's mama tells him to get the story. So the first call is, sushi baby, go fetch the milk. And that's mamas always have nicknames. And what's the response from Sushant? There is a response, yes, grow, I won't go to get the milk. So then his mother, for instance, this is her interrupt. Sushi baby, go fetch the milk. This is the interrupt acknowledge. And this tells the mother that, okay, since he said yes, he now knows what to do, right? So then what does he do? He saves the context. What does he do? He pauses his WhatsApp chat. He tells his friends his girlfriend is calling. He has to lie, Getting milk is not a macho thing, so he has to lie. His girlfriend is calling, locks the laptop screen, that's his context. He goes and gets milk, so he executes the interrupt service routine. And what does he get from his mother? He gets a sweet tooth, thanks for the milk. So once he does that, he can come back and resume life as normal. He resumes WhatsApp chat, tells the instructor to record the class so that he can watch it at 5 o'clock, unlocks the laptop movie, life returns to normal for Sushant. So that's the mama get the milk story. Let's hop across to the Sushant's sister's story. Sushant's sister has to actually address him as a, so that's Sushant's younger sister. So she calls him Pedda Anaya, Chetan, Bhai, whatever, right? So that's Telugu, Malayalam, and Indian, Hindustani, Bhai. So whatever she tells him, right? Sushant can pretend to be asleep. Sushant can say, I am not servicing milk requests from younger sisters. So he covers his head with a blanket. And what does then Sushant's sister do? What can she do if Sushant pretends to be asleep? Right? If Sushant pretends to be asleep, right? I think I put some link here, but the link is not working. Maybe because I have a laser pointer here. Right? So she must wait. So the IO must wait and interrupt again. So Sushant, meanwhile, is WhatsApping his friends from under the blanket. Now, is this allowed for a processor? Can the processor cover its head with a blanket and pretend not to service? Can it say I'm too busy to service your thing? Yes, it can. There is something called masking an interrupt. It means I refuse to service interrupts. Of course, processors do this refusal for various reasons. Maybe they are in a very time critical part in their own main program to actually handle an interrupt. So they don't want to be interrupted during that program. So they turn off the interrupt. So you can turn off the interrupt. It's not a good idea because all interrupts are necessary. So, but you still can turn it off and you say that, okay, go on doing this. And then you get ready, get out of bed, time for this class, brush your teeth. And then she makes the request again, please, Anna, go fetch the milk. So then you pause your Instagram, you close your WhatsApp chat, you lock the laptop, you go get the milk, and you say thanks. So what did you do when you got out of bed? You enabled interrupts. You removed the mask. Now, there are some requests like milk requests, which can wait like this, which can survive a period where the processor does not service them. But there are some interrupts which cannot wait, right? For instance, I think I have to search for an example for an interrupt which cannot wait. But all right, let's say you have a design of a microprocessor where if the power fails, the microprocessor saves all its registers into memory, right? Taking about 25 to 30 clock cycles to do so. And then it shuts down with a flag set saying, I stopped here. When the power comes back, it resumes from that point. It's like going into a deep sleep state or a hibernation state. Fine. Now, how many clock cycles does it have? It has to do all of this within 40 clock cycles of the power failure. Why does it have to do it within 40 clock cycles? Maybe you have put a big capacitor which can only supply power for 45 cycles worth of processor operations. So if it doesn't save within 45 cycles or 40 cycles, something will not get saved. It cannot resume execution. Now that power failure interrupt is something you cannot pretend not to service. So it's in processor language. It's called a non-maskable interrupt. It is an interrupt which has to be serviced. It's non-maskable. And an example of that is this red story here, where Sushant's papa, who is a non-maskable interrupt, is asking Sushant to go fetch the milk. Right? Now, you know that when Sushant told her, Sushant's mommy told him to fetch the milk, she didn't have to say where should Sushant go to get the milk. She didn't have to say that. He knew that he has to go to the milk booth, or he has to go to the corner shop, or he has to go to that person who gives them the milk. That was known. Somehow Sushant knew what to do to fetch the milk. But look at what Sushant's papa is telling him. He is telling him, Sushant, go get the milk. He doesn't even have to say, go get the milk. He says that only in the instruction here where he says, go fetch the milk from sector 6 market. Don't go to the corner milk kiosk and get the milk. Go to sector 6 market and fetch the milk. No, that's like an IO peripheral telling the processor, go to that location in memory and do what I'm asking you to do. Well, is that possible? Yes, it is possible. Right? It is possible because of a way in which you trick the processor. You know that the call instruction exists, and whatever you give to the call instruction is executed. So if you say call 1605, like I said, it will go to 1605 and execute. So the trick is pretend that there is a call instruction you are putting to the processor and tell it where to go. So Sushant's papa is actually saying that there is an instruction, but it also says go to this particular market and get the milk. So Sushant again saves this context, goes and gets milk from Sector 6 market, gets a Sweetu thanks. I mean, I don't know if Papas nowadays say Sweetu, but anyway, thanks. Then resumes the context. So these three stories are very like the interrupt stories you will meet in processors. Any questions so far?
So that
No, sir.
pretends to be a sleep part.
Hmm.
Is that very similar to locks and semaphores?
Locks and semaphores occur in operating systems. Yes, right. They are actually synchronization mechanisms between processes. Right. Here we don't really have a process, but yes, it is similar, not exactly the same, because the two entities, the two actors in this interaction, are a hardware chip, an I/O peripheral, and a CPU, which is a hardware peripheral. So two pieces of hardware talking to each other uh, can have synchronization mechanisms, but we don't call them locks and semaphores like we do in software and in operating systems. We call them handshaking. We call them control handshaking. So it is locks and semaphores are handshakings. Right? A semaphore is more like my last class's gamcha. Right?
Yes, sir.
Lock A lock is a mutex method. But here we are not doing that. We are actually depending on an explicit exchange of handshakes. Are you ready to go get the milk? Yes, I'm ready to go get the milk. Are two signals passing on the data bus between the two peripherals. So they are similar, but they're not the same. Any other questions? Okay, there were two voices I heard when I said, are there questions? But now there was only one question I answered. Did I answer both questions by some chance? Two
Yes,
questions
sir.
with one answer.
So I said it's clear.
It's clear.
I said it's clear. I didn't ask a question.
That's also an handshaking method. So I say, was there a question? You say it's clear. You handshook and said it's clear. So now I know there's no more question. So that's a handshaking. Now re-entrant interrupts. When interrupts interrupt the interrupt handler. Very nice. Tongue twister. Mind twister also. When interrupts interrupt the interrupt handler. Yeah, this guy. Yeah. So you have a program, it executes an interrupt, and inside the interrupt, you get another interrupt. So it executes that interrupt, and there you get another interrupt. How many of you read the story? Nobody. Maybe if I had posted this link in the chat, you would have read the story. It is from the uh, Bhagavad Katha. And in the Bhagavad Katha, Narad tells Vishnu, not me, Vishnu, that hey God, Vishnu, teach me what is Maya. So Vishnu says, I will, don't worry, but please get me a glass of water. Narad says, what a God I have got. I ask him to tell me such deep things like Maya, and he tells me not the software Maya, so, the true Maya in the spiritual sense. Right? So where is my glass of water? He goes, says, okay, I'll go get you a glass of water. So in the story, if you read this link, he goes and asks in a village, can I get a glass of water? And a very beautiful girl opens the door, and like most rishis confronted by beautiful girls, you must be knowing Menaka and Ramba and all these people. He says, oh, you are so beautiful that I must marry you. So he marries her, right? And he marries her, then he has children. And when he has children, he becomes an established citizen because everybody believes a person who has children. दो बच्चों का बाप है. Right? So he gets lots of children and he becomes a solid citizen of the village. They make him the mukhya of the village. And one day there is a cyclone and there is a flood and the village is overrun with the river. And then his family is washed away by the river. And then Narad is the only one. Obviously, he cannot die, so he's the one stuck in the tree. And he says, "Hey, Vishnu, 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 save me." So Vishnu appears, saves him, and says, "He says, where did you go? So many centuries have elapsed, and you have not come back. Where did you go?" He says, "I went to get you a glass of water." I taught you what is Maya. So this is exactly what is happening. The main program was executing. You executed an interrupt routine where an interrupt came and you executed something else, where an interrupt came and you executed something else. Now here is where you realize, oh, I should have returned here, and there you realize I should have returned here, and then you realize you have returned here, and then you learn Maya. Fine. So re-entrancy, therefore, is a fact of life. It can happen. Of course, you can stop it. You can say, at this point, I disable the interrupts, and at this point, I enable interrupts. Right? So you can do that. So which means that all these recursions which happen do not happen. They will not happen. But if you say, no, 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 these are equally important recursions. And what if one of these recursions is a non-maskable interrupt? Well, you have to service it. So you can't. So if it happens, you have to deal with it. Right? So this is called re-entrancy. It happens, right? And it happens very routinely. It's not a very great or earth-shattering thing in a processor's life, right? It's like I press a mouse, like you start Word, and Word takes some time to start up. And what do? You shake your mouse from left to right, left to right, left to right, left to right. You click it, click it, click it, click it. Each of those left to right shakes, each of those clicks is actually generating an interrupt to Windows, right? So, you know, if you did not shake your mouse, if you did not click it, you actually would have to wait a few microseconds less. But because you're impatient and you're shaking your mouse, you are actually creating interrupts for Windows, because Windows is going to catch all your mouse shakes and all your mouse clicks. Each of them is an interrupt to Windows. So re-entrancy is in front of you in Windows when you shake your mouse. So don't shake your mouse, right? Sit in front of your PC when Windows is starting up without shaking your mouse or doing anything to interrupt Windows. Let it start up on its own. So re-entrancy is a good example of shaking your mouse. It happens. Okay? But it can have more complicated examples. For instance, suppose you are building a data acquisition system for a Hadron Collider in Geneva. So you have some 30,000 such systems where a random subatomic particle arises due to the collision and must be sensed. So re-entrancy is a fact of life. You must write code which is re-entrant. Otherwise, how will you detect that random event? So be prepared for re-entrancy and know that it exists and that it can be dealt with. Okay, when you save a context, when you clear away your table to slice tomatoes, obviously you are going to take some time to do it. It can be automatically done. It can be done using instructions. But most processors only save that much information which they need to resume programs as when they come back. Right? So this particular delay is called latency. Latency means something which is, it's like I kick you, and after 5 seconds you say ouch. So between my kick and your ouch, there is a 5-second delay, which is a latency. We'll call it your ouch latency. So between the interrupt happening and its ISR starting, it takes a context switch time, right? And of course, it takes the ISR execution time. That's also a latency. That's the latency caused due to the interrupt, right? And sometimes we cannot, for instance, like Narad's story. You know, he went away for several centuries, getting a glass of water. Now, it was because Vishnu is a god and does not need the glass of water that this was allowed. Because Vishnu was happy that he was learning what is Maya. But there are situations where taking the processor away, hijacking the processor, so to say, for a long period of time is not acceptable. You cannot, for instance, go into ISR, which takes for 5 hours. But it can happen once the execution has passed to the ISR. How do you get it back? You see, the PC is now in the ISR's kingdom, right? So what we should do is we should have a sort of estimate of what is the maximum bound on the upper bound on the time it takes to execute that ISR. right? Just like if Sushant's mommy tells him to get the milk and he comes back after 21 years with a wife and a child, that's not what she anticipates, isn't it? When she asks him to go get the milk. Right? So she must know that if he is going to get the milk and he takes more than 2 hours, he's obviously not getting the milk, he has got married. Right? So that's an assumption. That's something which must be kept to a minimum. So the amount of information. I've written this here. I now I'm reading this. What if Sushant chose to get engaged to a girl, right? Obviously, or not obvious in nowadays, but chose to get engaged to a girl or a boy each time he was asked to fetch milk. What if he change into a three-piece suit every time he went to the market? You know, then the latency becomes too much. You ask him for a packet of milk, he takes 45 minutes to just change. Right? That's too much. Right? So the context switch time is too much. So we typically save only the program counter, the PC, and the processor status register. Anything else which you need to save must be saved explicitly. These two are implicit. Whatever you save will be restored to its respective register when you execute the return from interrupt instruction. So two types of interrupts. One requires all register contents to be saved. The other does not require all contents to be saved. There is this approach where Sushant has a mirror Sushant. Whatever Sushant does on his study table, the mirror Sushant does on his study table. So when his mother asks him to go get a milk, the mirror Sushant is absolutely exactly at the same point where Sushant was when he left to get the milk. So you don't have to come back and retrieve the registers. You just have to say, oh, what is my alter ego, this shadow Sushant, doing? Is he frozen on page number 7 in the middle of equation 3? Well, that is where I was. So you can take that approach, but it's a slightly costly approach. It is not difficult to do this in hardware. Duplicating exactly or mirroring a set of registers is very easy in hardware, but it requires that much extra hardware in the processor, right? Where would you actually use such a shadow register? Where the interrupt latency, the context switch time must be made 0, right? In that case, you invest in the extra hardware. You tell the manufacturer, put these registers in so that whatever is the GPR register content, stack contents, flag contents, everything is mirrored. I don't have to write anything to that. It automatically gets mirrored inside the processor. So you can build a specialized processor to do that. And is that something which only Intel can do? No, even you can do it. For instance, since most of you might have already used VHDL, you can design your own processor with shadow registers. So, you know, do most of you have any exposure to VHDL?
They are using Logisim currently to.
They do not use any HDL.
HDL I have not introduced yet.
No. Any other course?
VLSI.
Last semester,
Very basics we had done.
Okay, so you know that you can describe any hardware using hardware description languages like VHDL and Verilog, right? And you will also learn that there are better, more elegant, faster, more comprehensive ways of describing hardware, um, which you will be taught in maybe 4th year, right? You like architecture description languages, for instance, but once you know how to program in VHDL or Verilog, you can build your own processor. Right? There's nothing so great about building a processor. Yeah, as a matter of fact, it will, if you know VHDL, building your own processor is a 20 to 25 minute lab experiment. It is a question of compiling inside the right software. So you can build your own processor, and if you build your own processor, you can put your own shadow registers. There's nothing preventing you. Okay. Interrupts are deeper than they look. Fine. They are more than a simple mechanism. You know, it seems as if, okay, fine, we will go do something and come back. in a deeper sense, you are actually shifting control from your program to another program. It's like going to your neighbor's house or sending your son to your neighbor's house to cook lunch. Cooking lunch in your kitchen and cooking lunch in the neighbor's kitchen, you never know what will happen to your son or your daughter. Fine. They could nothing, something could fall on them, they could get married, nothing. It's out of their hands, basically. The program counter is out of your hands once it is in the ISR. Getting it back is not actually that, I wouldn't say complex. It's not non-complex. It is deep. Now, only when the execution has stopped and the interrupted program resumes, can you definitively say that you are back in control. So you can actually use this in operating systems, many control applications, where certain routines must be very accurately timed relative to external events, right? Like for instance, let's say you are using a computer to switch on a radiation source for a cancer patient. You know that cancer patients receive chemotherapy and radiation from cobalt emitters. So suppose your processor is supposed to switch on the cobalt emission window for let's say 3.5 nanoseconds. Now 3.5 nanoseconds and 3.7 nanoseconds is a very different thing from a medical point of view. 3.7 nanoseconds may burn portions of your brain. 3.5 nanoseconds will only burn your tumor. So that is a very, very accurately timed subroutine. You must take 3.5 nanoseconds plus or minus 0.001%. So how do you do that? Right? You do that by doing what is called real-time subroutines. So real-time subroutines are used for such interrupts. So interrupts are used very, very frequently in operating systems, and we will look at this in the next class because my own class is going to start in 8 minutes, so I will have to stop here. I can take a couple of questions, but no later than 9:55 I must stop. Any questions? We have a 2-hour class coming up tomorrow, so if there are any longer questions, you can always start the next class tomorrow with that question.
I have one comment, not a question. The examples you took were really amazing examples. I was enjoying all the.
Well, thanks to your daughter. She gave me that example.
Yeah,
I didn't plan for it.
I hope students enjoyed this. Nice.
Okay. So can I assume that there are no more questions then? We will start tomorrow at I think 3 or 3:30.
3:30.
3:30. No, Thursday. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
So okay, we'll see you tomorrow.